And I was looking at this diagram of genetics the other day, and I stumbled across how much. And I'm not going to name any names because I know people get offended and you know rules out there about stuff. But anyway, there's a large portion of the global population right now that is up to 70% inbred, meaning that they're already at the point in inbreeding, I guess. I don't know what the right word for it. It's just kind of a cultural thing that developed from isolated pockets of villages. Not that there wasn't enough people to not have this a problem. It's just that people didn't travel and their customs and other things kept them close to home. But what it means scientifically is certain populations that have recently been moving to Europe and other places had a real genetic emergency about to happen where they were about to have, from 70 to 100% stillborns. And has nothing to do with anything else except for the degradation of DNA. And they're having all kinds of, genetic based health issues. And it seems like they moved those people either A, to get rid of them, or B, to make sure that in the near future there's new admixtures to save certain populations from literally disappearing off the face of the earth in the next 100 years. And the reason I say that is because just from the genetic deformations alone, their populations were going to A, shrink, and B, have a considerably lower IQ, just resulting from that alone, and then C, sterility problems and other things like that. So it's something that the world didn't know about, but somebody somewhere did know about it early on, and it seems like that's part of the redistribution of populations. I think that there's been a lot more problems with human genes than the elite have let on. Everything from the poisoning of populations through forever chemicals, through the genetic manipulation through their foods and medicines, dirty water, other things. And then, for the first world countries or the Western world, there's already a fertility problem that's unidentified, the cause of. But then when you look at some of these remote populations, they were on the verge of extinction if they didn't get new admixture. In other words, if people didn't move in or move out to somewhere else, they were going to disappear or at least have major societal problems due to low IQs. I mean, the retardation of genes and intellect because of social and behavioral trends that don't work out in the long run. I hope I said that without offending anyone.
None taken. I think that the Anunnaki, when they blend an original genome sequence, there might have been a shelf life on that, or that was given as a safety mechanism so those pocketed isolation areas could not continue to evolve indefinitely.
Never get left out in the cold. There is never a reason to ever let you or your family suffer. Instafire and Civilization Cycle are on a mission to make fire starting and off-grid living easy for everyone. You shouldn't have to be a mountain man to strike a flame and make a fire anytime, anywhere.
Could you think about this for just a second here? So I'm going to, again, I don't want to offend anybody who is afraid to do any mind experiments here. But the original stories, translated from the Sumerian cuneiform text, as well as other remnants found in southern Africa, especially Zimbabwe, talk about a time 400,000 years ago when Homo sapiens sapien was gene created as a species, as a worker class for this other race called the Anunnaki. Now just go with me for a second here. But they had blended our genome with an indigenous already species on the planet, But I think they put a default destruct mechanism in there because if you were to break away from their control structure and you were able to form a fully functional, autonomous, let's say, equivalent of a country today, completely in itself for thousands and thousands of years, never to make contact with outside anything, at that point, you're already what you're talking about, and that would be a self-destruct mechanism because they would have to bring in or go outside to find, new breeding stock, for a better term. And just think of us as animals or breeding stock. That was put in place because you got to think about, well, if these people break off and they're out there for 2,000 years on their own, damn, they're going to be very intelligent and they're going to come up with an incredible amount of inventions, especially if they are able to create without limitation, like we have been limited through our last easily 200 years of innovations that could break humanity free for free energy devices, different types of harmonic frequency mining techniques, and everything in between that we would need to do. Electroculture, there's like a million things, gravitational vortexing, and you could go with magnetization on I guess, frequency electrified plates to get higher seed yields, you get more yield out of the seeds, and magnetic motors, and we could have gone the whole gamut with that. But we got stuck going this blast it, break it, boom, put the copper above our heads kind of route. Now imagine if you didn't have to do that and you were a breakaway society that was able to continually evolve. And eventually in the future, if I was an Anunnaki like lab scientist, I'd be like, damn, they're pretty smart already. We got to dumb them down, so they just kind of follow orders. Are smart enough to continue to do stuff and think they're smart. But if they really have full intelligence, completely uncontrolled, without a global layer on there to continue to repress these inventions of science, technology, thought, engineering, art, creativity, etc., they're going to go a million directions with that. They're going to finally reach our level once again. Now, we need to prevent that from happening. Let's put a default mechanism so if they do rope themselves off and they stay in a homogeneous, isolated population, eventually it will collapse because it will be exactly what you just described. Again, is it too far to make sense? Because I'll tell you another gene bottleneck going back in history here. Looking at supervolcanoes around the world, there is one called Lake Toba that's in Sumatra Island in Indonesia. That went off about 70,000 years ago, and it was a proper supervolcano. And apparently that bottleneck brought humanity down to less than 10 million humans on this planet, which means let's just even go 50-50 men, women. That's only 5 million possible combinations of breeding pairs. So we already got knocked down at least once during this ice age period, and who knows what happened really coming out of the last ice age, like the total global population, who knows what it was? I am sure it was far larger than we are told. Because most of those cities are 400 feet underwater. They would have been on the coastlines as well, predominantly squeezed around the equatorial belts. But I mean, they could have been in the billion plus population as well. We just don't know. But again, if that was, and after the Younger Dryas, and then we get the story of Noah and coming down to just a couple of breeding pairs again left over after some cataclysm, it happened at least twice. Younger Dryas and also Lake Toba. So it's happened twice in this ice age epoch of time that we have endured so far. And you got to figure the same thing happening. Entered the last ice age and exiting out of the last ice age 2 ice ages ago. They would have experienced some traumatic, effect on the planet exiting out of the ice age 118,000 years ago. So I'm sure we have squeezed in, squeezed out, squeezed in, squeezed out. And I am curious if every so often we are visited once again to be reseeded, for a better term. And then this is why we see quite a few different stories throughout antiquity of direct connection and interaction with what you would consider interstellar beings or hollow earth beings, either way. But again, that Lake Toba thing that brought us down to 10 million. So everything on this planet so far as a human that you understand came from that bottlenecking of 10 million humans at the Lake Toba event. Because the rest of the even closer in history is way sketchier. So I think you can run with that point, Ransom. I know you could.
Well, even if we exclude extraterrestrial interjection or, other than the normal human group's interjection of genetics. Those little groups that were bottlenecked were not the only humans on the planet. And especially with that date at 70,000 years ago, for some reason, Cro-Magnon decided to branch out all over the world and mix with everybody. It might not have been just an accidental, we came across them and they mixed. It more could have been some kind of necessity to interject new genes. They may have had no choice because those other groups of humans were probably dwindled down to small populations as well. So you got Denisovan, you have at least 12 different ones. They haven't put names on these groups of different people. There's one in the Andaman Islands in between India and Indonesia. And the people have been living there. They're an admix of Cro-Magnon and some unidentified hominid. And they've just been doing their thing. But we know they're the genetic source for billions of people that live in the subcontinent of India now. And they mixed with European, or I guess Eurasian people, not really European people, but Eurasian people moved in, and they started this thing that was eventually became a caste system. And all around the world, we see the same thing. We see these caste systems, which in today's world are now resulting in genetic problems because groups separated within themselves and wouldn't even intermarry or interbreed within their own groups due to social status or, religious reasons, or I don't like that village over there. But if you imagine back then, before all of those social constructs on people, and you had groups of people that needed to survive, you're not going to want to let your children mix with their cousins or their siblings. So it would have been a better choice even to come across other humans and swap DNA, swap some spit. We know that's the case because today we're a hybrid species of probably 15 plus different hominids. And then they invent social constructs that limit people to skin tone when that's actually irrelevant. Most of these different hominids had a whole range of skin tones, hair colors, phenotypes within their own groups. But in a world of 8 billion people, it's hard to believe there are probably billions of people that have genetic problems because they've been squeezed in and not allowed to move around, whether it was war or famine or just a social construct. We may find ourselves in that position in the near future where groups of humans are looking for other groups of humans just to survive. The problem is every time that seems to happen, humans seem to get in this spot where your little group of people just coming across another person could be an extinction level event for your people because, people don't always have the best in mind for other groups. And, we talk a lot about in modern society, if things fell apart, the grid failed. I don't know. We had an EMP strong enough from the sun or from one of the technologically advanced countries to put us in the Stone Age, basically. And the same thing would happen then. Groups of people would group up. They would segregate themselves. And seeing new, different people would not only have the possibility of being a blessing for trade and growth, but it would also be a perceived danger because those people could come in and wipe you out. And we know that in history, in lots of different histories, that exact thing happened where a smaller, less technologically advanced civilization either was absorbed in some cases where that works out well genetically, or they were wiped out and disappeared completely. And now we're competing with not just humans, but groups of humans that believe they can design the future of evolution. So we have all these programs going on and, talking about that worm there. Imagine the amount of unknown.
Well, Ransom, could I interject first before you start on the worm? But what's one thing that's common amongst all times and all of these same people that you're referencing? What's the one thing that connects them all? I don't care through space and time, but what is one thing that they have unanimously agreed upon?
They like gold?
The reverence for gold. Yeah, something about that. has been put in, and I don't care if it was 70,000 years ago or if it was younger dry as 15,000 years ago or if it was 8,000 years ago, there is something about this metal that has been revered for as long as we've ever, the first person to cast eyes on it. And again, I'll go a little maybe microaggression, large aggression on this one to those of you who are afraid to listen to new information. If you go back into some of the Indian Vedic texts, they talk about us as a species created 21 million years ago. So that'll blow your religion out of the water there in terms of how far this has been really back in history, how far it's been back in history. So if you want to go with the 21 million year old root, well, gold would have been revered then as well. But if we stay with more of the more quote unquote modern accounts of how we as a species were here, we evolved 400,000 years ago, and then some way we come back in, and then the reverence for gold as well with the Anunnaki and the southern mining operations in South Africa and Zimbabwe. That's even an off-planet species that reveres gold. So whatever it is that's kind of hardwired into us, that shiny rock there that's been that's always around in the rivers, it just captivates humanity. And people will kill for that rock. And that's the craziest thing. That's one thing that people will kill for, die for, fight for, intermarry for, create allegiances for, or just purchase now to hold on, and it still keeps your wealth intact. That's a crazy thing. 70,000 years of proven track record.